Fire. Sometimes, the person who breaks you is the only one who knows how to put you back together. If you believe in second chances, unexpected love, and stories that touch the soul, then stay till the end of this one. And don't forget to subscribe to Love Buster TV for more heart-shaking journeys like this. Fire. Once upon a time in a small but restless town where secrets were buried deeper than roots of the oldest oak tree, there was a girl named Amara who walked into her new high school on the first day with a cane in her hand and a smile stitched bravely across her lips, though her eyes saw nothing but darkness, for she had been blind since birth, and while she had long accepted that her world was painted not in colors but in textures, sounds, and emotions, the world around her had never been kind. Especially in places where appearances were everything, where strength was measured not by resilience but by how loud you could laugh at someone else's pain. And Amara soon became the target of ridicule from a boy named Kieran, the star athlete with emerald eyes that could pierce hearts and a smirk that had broken more girls than he could count. Yet beneath his arrogance lay a secret storm he refused to let anyone see, for Kieran had been raised in a house where silence was louder than any applause, where his father's fist spoke more often than his father's mouth. And so he learned to survive by being cruel before cruelty could reach him, projecting his bruises onto others, and Amara, with her delicate frame and white cane, became the easiest prey, though what Kieran did not realize was that Amara, though blind, had a spine stronger than steel and a heart that could hear truths others tried desperately to bury, so when he tripped her in the cafeteria, causing her tray to scatter like broken glass across the floor, and the crowd erupted in laughter, she picked herself up calmly, dusted her knees, and whispered softly, "You laugh the loudest, but your heart sounds the saddest," leaving him stunned, because no one had ever seen through him like that, not even the teachers, not even the girls who adored his face. Yet in the weeks that followed he continued his torment, pushing her books off the desk, mocking her inability to see, leaving cruel notes written in large sharp letters she could not read, but she always responded not with anger but with words that haunted him at night, like when he shouted, "You're nothing without someone to guide you." And she answered, "Maybe, but you're nothing even with everyone looking up to you." And it was in these moments that Kieran found himself unable to shake her voice from his head, for her blindness seemed to make her see him more clearly than anyone else ever had, and so began a twisted, complicated dance between tormentor and victim, where cruelty clashed with compassion, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, cruelty began to waver, but pride kept his mask in place, until the day everything changed. It was a rainy afternoon, the kind where thunder rattled lockers and the halls smelled of wet paper, when Amara was walking alone by the staircase, counting her steps carefully, when someone shoved her shoulder harder than usual and her cane slipped from her grasp, clattering down the stairs, and she lost balance, her body tilting dangerously toward the sharp edge, when suddenly strong arms caught her, pulling her against a chest she could feel trembling, and though she could not see his face, she heard Kieran's breathless voice whisper, "I didn't mean to, God. I didn't mean to," and in that moment something shifted between them, because she realized the boy who had been her greatest enemy had just saved her life, and he realized that the girl he had mocked for being weak was holding his wrist tightly as if anchoring him to the world, and from that day onward Kieran's torment began to falter, replaced by awkward silences and hesitant apologies disguised as sarcastic remarks, and Amara, who had always believed kindness was a choice, decided to test if even a bully could change. So she began to speak to him when no one else was listening, asking about his dreams, about his fears, about the way his footsteps sounded heavier on some days than others, and though at first he snapped at her, over time his walls began to crumble, piece by piece, until one night, sitting alone on the football bleachers where no one could see them, he confessed in a shaking voice that his father had left him broken long before he ever broke anyone else, and that sometimes he bullied others because it was the only way he knew to stop himself from feeling like the smallest person in the room. And Amara, listening with her unseeing eyes turned toward him, simply reached for his hand and said, "You don't have to be who hurt you," and that sentence unraveled him completely, for he had never been given permission to be anything else, never been forgiven for being damaged, and suddenly the girl he once despised became the only person he could imagine meeting. But just as their fragile bond began to bloom, the world conspired to tear it apart, because rumors spread like wildfire that Kieran, the golden boy, was falling for the blind girl, and his so-called friends mocked him mercilessly, saying he must pity her, that she was nothing compared to the perfect cheerleaders who chased after him, and though he tried to ignore them, His pride roared back to life, and one cruel afternoon, cornered in front of everyone, he denied Amara publicly, shouting, "Why would I ever fall for her?" While she stood nearby, her face burning though she could not see the laughter around her, and in that instant her heart shattered, not because of the words but because she had believed he was different, because she had touched the part of him that was human, but he had chosen his mask over her truth, and so she walked away, refusing to speak to him again, though at night in the quiet of her room she still heard his broken confession echoing in her memory. Kieran, meanwhile, found himself hollow, for the victory of his pride tasted like ashes, and he could not sleep, haunted by the image of her walking away, her cane tapping in angry rhythm like a drumbeat against his chest, until one evening when he returned home to find his father drunk and raging, smashing bottles and shouting, and for the first time Kieran raised his voice back, defending himself, refusing to bow, and though the fight ended with bruises, something inside him awakened, a desperate courage to change, to stop repeating the cycle, and the first step of that change, he knew, was to win back the girl he had betrayed. He began leaving small gestures where she could find them, an audio recorder filled with the sound of his guitar playing, a notebook written in braille though he had taught himself clumsily to do so, a single rose pressed between pages of her favorite book. But Amara resisted, refusing to be another lesson for him, until the night of the school's winter showcase, when she was scheduled to perform a piano piece she had practiced for months, and nerves threatened to consume her. But as she sat at the keys, the audience whispering about her blindness, she suddenly heard a familiar voice behind her, whispering, "Play for yourself, not for them." And when she finished the song to thunderous applause, she realized Kieran had stood behind the curtain the whole time, ready to catch her if she faltered, and later that night, on the empty stage, he knelt in front of her and whispered, "I was your bully, Amara. But I don't want to be your regret. I want to be the man who learns how to love you in the dark and in the light." And though tears slid down her cheeks, she whispered back, "Then prove it, not to me, but to yourself." And from that night on, their story became less about bully and victim and more about two broken souls learning to heal together, stumbling, falling, forgiving, fighting, but always returning, until the line between cruelty and love blurred into something stronger than either had ever known. And though the world still judged, though whispers still followed them down hallways, they walked hand in hand, her cane tapping steady rhythm to the beat of his heart, two opposites bound not by sight or reputation but by the truth only they could hear in each other's silence. And that was the miracle. The blind girl fell for her bully, but in doing so, she taught him how to truly see. Dash dash dash.